Hi guys, so today we're going to be looking at the main causes of World War One, and we're just sort of introducing some of the things that we looked at last term. So World War One is often called the Great War, or the war to end all wars. It was the first war in which modern machine guns, chemical weapons, tanks, fighter aircraft and submarines were used to cause devastation on a global scale. World War I destroyed entire cities and towns and took the lives of millions of soldiers and civilians. At the end of the war, the map of Europe was redrawn. Once powerful empires were broken up and new nations were created in their place. Most people believe that this war was caused by the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. However, the causes are a lot more intricate. So if you have a look at the map there, you can notice that the Central Powers, otherwise known as the Triple Alliance in Australia, and the Triple Entente are in the orange, Triple Alliance are in the pink. The neutral countries are in blue, and I can assure you that Belgium would have liked to have been neutral. So the state of Europe before World War I. So this is what the map used to look like. So France lost some rich land to Germany in 1871. Many French people wanted revenge. Others feared their strong neighbour. So they actually had some of Germany's country that's currently there, and it was called the Rhineland, and they desperately wanted it back because it had some seriously good ore materials that would have been very, very rich. Britain feared the growing power of Germany, and Britain had a large empire and did not want Germany to get any new colonies. Germany was late in the game. They really wanted to expand their empire, and a lot of other countries did not want that. So Germany was formed in 1871. So by 1914, it was a powerful country. Germany was jealous of the empires of France and Britain. Germany had a strong army but was envious of Britain's navy. And that's why there was a lot of concern between those two countries. Every single time that Germany tried to match Britain's navy, Britain would then build more, which meant that Germany built more. It was a never-ending circle. So Austria-Hungary had a large empire as well, but many people in the empire wanted to be free. Austria-Hungary wanted to control the Balkans, but it feared Russia's power there. So Russia was worried about Germany and wanted to control the Balkans to make sure that the Russian ships could reach the Mediterranean Sea. And let's just put it this way, it did not work out well. Turkey, like Austria-Hungary, also had a large empire, but it was crippling at the time. But they also feared Russia and Austria-Hungary in the Balkans. So these countries were the Balkans. So that lighter blue is the Balkans. They were the powder keg of Europe. Other countries tried to gain power in the Balkans, and Serbia hated Austria and stirred up a lot of trouble against Austria. Essentially, the Balkans War was inevitable. It was always going to lead to some sort of conflict, and because those countries wanted to be free from Austria-Hungary, it was problematic to continue having them being controlled by other countries. So the main causes of World War I, so whenever a question asks for the main causes, they're talking about the militarism, the alliances, the imperialism and nationalism.
Militarism. There was intense rivalry between the bigger European countries over the strength of their armies and navies. The German Kaiser was determined to see his country great.
His speeches resounded with megalomania. He told new recruits to the army,
"Children of my guard, you are now my soldiers. You have given yourselves over to me, body and soul. There is only one enemy for you, and that is my enemy."
The German Kaiser was trying to match the armies of France and Russia, and at the same time build a battle fleet that would rival Britain's. In the 20 years up to 1914, the German Navy was transformed to become the second largest in the world.
In Britain, alarm grew with the growth of the German fleet just across the water. Public opinion, disunited on almost everything else, was united on the need for battleships. Each launching, whether in Barrow or in Bremen, drove Britain and Germany further and further apart. Even men as sympathetic towards Germany as Lord Haldane could say,
"Peace was to be preserved, but preserved on what terms? On the terms that the German was so strong by land and sea that he could swagger down the high street of the world, making his will prevail at every turn?"
In 1908, Lloyd George met the German ambassador.
I explained to him that the real ground for the growing antagonism in this country towards Germany was not jealousy of her rapidly expanding commerce, but fear of her growing navy.
But the Kaiser did not care.
I do not wish for a good understanding with England at the expense of the extension of the German fleet.
So, Germany's naval dreams made Britain a potential enemy, just as her military might had kept alive the hostility of France. The two nations were drawn together by Germany's challenge. The Entente Cordiale was forged.
Alliances. Two powerful groups of countries faced each other. The Triple Alliance of Germany, Austria and Italy caused France, Russia and Britain to draw closer. Imperialism. The big powers were competing for empires. Germany especially was jealous of Britain's huge empire, which centred on India and covered a quarter of the world. In Africa, France, Germany, Belgium and Italy, as well as Britain, were busy carving up territory, building railroads and plantations, competing for land and wealth. The fourth main cause was nationalism. Large nations were proud of their position, and the small nations, which were ruled by others, wanted their freedom. This hunger for freedom was strongest in the Slav lands, in the Balkans, where Austria ruled many Serbs.
I hope that video gave you a little better understanding of the main causes of World War I, but we'll go into a little bit more detail. So, for militarism, as the world entered the 20th century, an arms race had begun. By 1914, Germany had the greatest increase in military build-up. Great Britain and Germany both greatly increased their navies in this time period. Further, in Germany and Russia particularly, the military establishment began to have a greater influence on public policy, so it started to become a military state. This increase in militarism helped push the countries involved into war, and it was constantly who has more kind of deal. So, for alliances, over time, countries throughout Europe made mutual defence agreements that would pull them into battle. These treaties meant that if one of them was attacked, Allied countries were bound to defend them. Before World War I, the following alliances existed: Russia and Serbia, Germany and Austria-Hungary, France and Russia, Britain, France and Belgium, Japan and Britain. So, after the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, Austria declared war on Serbia. Russia got involved to defend Serbia. Germany, seeing Russia mobilizing, declared war on Russia. France was then drawn in against Germany and Austria-Hungary. Germany attacked France through Belgium, pulling Britain into the war. Then Japan entered the war. Later, Italy and the United States would enter on the side of the Triple Entente. However, Italy flip-flopped quite a bit. So you can see from that that they were already gearing up for war. Why would you make an alliance if you weren't already preparing for war? So they already knew it was coming. So this is the map that is pretty clear. So if we happen to have a look at this, you've got the Triple Entente, you got the United Kingdom, you got France, you got Russia, and they've also pulled Africa in there as well, but that's mainly because many of the colonies of Africa at the time were either belonging to France or the UK. Then you have the Triple Alliance, which is Germany, Austria-Hungary and Italy, but it also included the Ottoman Empire. Like I said before, Italy kept flip-flopping. So in this particular map, it happens to be a later one. It flip-flopped between the Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente, depending on who was winning at the time. So imperialism is when a country increases their power and wealth by bringing additional territories under their control. Before World War I, Africa and parts of Asia were points of contention amongst the European countries. Essentially, the more you had, the better off you were. This was especially true because of the raw materials these areas could provide. The increasing competition and desire for greater empires led to an increase in confrontation that helped to push the world into World War I. And you've got to remember that Germany started off as a nation in 1871. This was by 1914 that they started to build up their empire. And because they were so late to the game, they didn't have many territories to take. So starting a war seemed like a good idea at the time. So this is pretty much how it worked out. And you can see some of the countries that were being owned in 1900s. You'll notice that pretty much the top half of Africa either belonged to France or we're looking at Great Britain, and then you've got some that belong to Germany. But in relation to the map itself, you'll notice that a lot of it was was pretty much dependent on France or Germany. So nationalism is the last one. So much of the origin of the war was based on the desire of the Slavic people in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Herzegovina, to no longer be a part of the Austria-Hungary, but instead to be part of Serbia. They had nothing to do with Austria-Hungary. They had nothing in common with them. They would prefer to be part of Serbia. In this way, nationalism led directly to the war. In a more general way, the nationalism of the various countries throughout Europe contributed not only to the beginning, but the extension of the war in Europe. Each country tried to prove their dominance and power. You've got to remember at the end of World War I, it was nationalism that brought Germany together after they had to pay back their reparations, after they were blamed for the war. The whole idea of making Germany great again. So, Franz Ferdinand has been assassinated, and this was the work of nationalism. And most of you know that he was assassinated by Gavrilo Princip, and it was pretty much because he was very much a nationalist and he wanted to be free of Austria-Hungary. So the immediate cause, the rest of them are just underlying causes of World War I. The thing that really started the war was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. So it comes into play on June 1914. So a Serbian nationalist terrorist group called the Black Hand sent groups in to assassinate the Archduke. Their first attempt failed when a driver avoided a grenade thrown at their car. It literally bounced off their car and it just blew up somewhere else, and that guy happened to get arrested. However, later in the day, a Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip assassinated him and his wife while they were in Sarajevo, Bosnia, which was part of Austria-Hungary. This was in protest to Austria-Hungary having control of this region. Serbia wanted to take over Bosnia and Herzegovina. One day I'll get that right. This assassination led to Austria-Hungary declaring war on Serbia. So when Russia began to mobilize due to its alliance with Serbia, Germany declared war on Russia. Thus began the expansion of the war to include all those involved in the mutual defense alliances. So as soon as this happened, everybody who was not prepared to fight in battle suddenly became prepared to fight in battle. So we'll watch a little clip about this.
For almost 50 years, the Austro-Hungarian Empire has been one of the largest and most powerful forces in the world.
That gobbled up huge amounts of the area around Austria, many of the countries we'd see as Eastern Europe.
But now it's plagued by political unrest, which threatens to destroy the realm entirely, particularly in the province of Bosnia.
Some people there want to be released from the empire, to be in a self-determined country.
Still, one man is desperate to preserve the Union, the heir to the empire's throne, 50-year-old Archduke Franz Ferdinand.
He's looking forward to governing this massive empire.
On June 28th, the Archduke and his wife Sophie journeyed to Bosnia on a routine state visit.
The trip has been planned in great detail for about 6 months, and it's all going to be a big celebration of the Austrian Empire.
Or so they think. Together with the local governor, Oskar Poderek, the couple begins traveling towards Town Hall as part of an open-top motorcade.
It's a lovely summer's day, everyone's really excited. People are really out there to catch a glimpse of Franz Ferdinand and his wife.
But not everyone is enjoying the spectacle. Suddenly, a black object flies out from the crowd.
A man throws a bomb at the Archduke's car, but it bounces off Franz Ferdinand's car and goes under the one behind. That car is hit, the people are injured, but Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie are unscathed.
The would-be assassin is arrested as the motorcade races to the safety of the town hall. But the Archduke is furious at the lapse in security.
His friends are injured, and his wife has been put in danger. He is absolutely boiling with anger.
Still, the governor insists that with the assailant in custody, the danger has surely passed.
Poderek says, let's just carry on and put it down to an unfortunate incident.
So Ferdinand agrees to continue with the tour.
But little do they know, one simple mistake will end in disaster.
So before we go into the Schlieffen Plan, you have to remember that the assassination of Franz Ferdinand was actually due to nationalism. But a lot of these countries believed that the alliance system wouldn't work, that if they, declared war on one country, it would just fold, or it would only be a war with that one country. Unfortunately, this was not the case, and Germany had actually planned for this. Germany had intended to attack France through Belgium, and von Schlieffen, who made this plan, wasn't even alive when they declared war. So this has been in the works for quite some time. This is the theory, this is the plan in theory. So the main aim of the German army was to swing through Holland and Belgium, move rapidly through northern France, and encircle Paris from the west. This was to take 6 weeks. In fact, they were hoping that it would be over by Christmas. However, this is what actually happened. Russia mobilized more rapidly than expected. Some German troops were therefore withdrawn from the Western Front and sent east. The attack began further south than originally planned and was delayed in Belgium. The army did not attempt to encircle Paris. There was no point. And the Germans were halted south of the River Marne and pushed back. So the Schlieffen Plan failed, and it failed miserably. Before we can go into the Schlieffen Plan, we have to look at the Allied and Central Powers. In other words, the Alliance and the Triple Entente. In 1914, Central Europe had divided into a system of alliances. Germany had aligned with Austria-Hungary and France with Russia. Britain had no formal commitment to France or Russia, but had developed an understanding since 1904. It was presumed that in a European war, Britain would fight on the left-hand side of the French. The Schlieffen Plan came into play when the Germans feared a war on 2 fronts. They were to swing through neutral Belgium and onto France, encircling Paris. The aim was to knock France out of the war quickly before Russia could mobilize its forces. Essentially, Germany didn't want to have to fight on 2 fronts. They didn't want to have to fight both France and Russia. So they thought by going through Belgium, they could actually knock out France and only focus their forces in Russia. The Germans advanced through southwest Belgium, where the British made contact with them at Mons on the 23rd of August. The British briefly halted the Germans, but such was the overwhelming number of their enemy that they were forced to retreat. Half the British force stopped and fought at Le Cateau on the 26th of August to give the rest the chance to get away. The 200-mile retreat continued south for 2 weeks and ended on the River Marne.
The moment of mobilization in each country was the moment when the war plan took effect. Nowhere was this clearer than in Germany, for Germany had become the prisoner of her plan. The Schlieffen Plan had existed since 1905. General Field Marshal Count Alfred von Schlieffen, Chief of Staff for 18 years, had devoted his mind to one problem: the danger to Germany created by the Franco-Russian agreement. War on 2 fronts, east and west. He assumed that the Russian giant would move slowly. The French might move fast. His answer to the problem was simple: smash the French before the Russians entered the field. So one army, only 250,000 men, would join the Austrians to contain the Russian threat. 7 armies, over 1.5 million men, would fall on France. By sheer weight and speed, they would beat her to her knees in 40 days, and then turn eastward. The difficulty was how to get at France. A strong line of well-planned fortresses lay along the frontier. Von Schlieffen's answer was couched in the grand manner. He would outflank the French. He would march through Belgium, trample on neutrality. Not only that, he would send the bulk of his army through Belgium. A mere handful would face the French along the frontier, and all the rest, over 1 million men, would go for a vast encirclement of the French army. Through Brussels, southwestwards across the Seine, round Paris itself, Then eastward towards Germany again to attack the French forces from behind. Now von Schlieffen was dead, but the whole vast apparatus of his plan was poised to move.
Okay, so for the weekly tasks this week, you need to go to the following website, and this is an online worksheet. You need to use your full name and click Save and hand in the work once you have completed the worksheet. It is due by this Friday at 3 p.m. Make sure you sign up with your full name and create an easy password that you'll remember, as we'll be doing a few of these online worksheets. I recommend that you create an account. It's free. If it starts asking for money, it won't, but just make sure you click no. Alright, so for the extension and enrichment tasks, and it's completely optional, you don't have to do it, but you may want to. For the extension activity, imagine you're an Australian reporter in Sarajevo on the 28th of June. What a scoop, because we all know what's happened there. I've mentioned it a few times. You are to create the front page of the newspaper that shows the events that occurred, appropriate headlines and bylines, pictures, the arrest of the assassin with an explanation of why he did it, and possible outcomes of this assassination. Now try to make it as creative as possible, and what you may want to do is make it a picture or change it to a PDF so we can upload it on Teams and show everyone what you're doing. You don't have to, just something you may want to do. If not, you can submit it online on Compass. For the enrichment activity, you can just watch the videos which give you a more in-depth view of how and why World War I started to gain a better understanding of the topic. These are the crash course ones in case you're interested in those. Have a good week. Remember, submit your work by Friday 3 p.m.